Son of a bitch. All right. I thought we were done here. But as I uploaded the original file, jump on Twitter quickly. Never jump on Twitter. Twitter sucks. The Leafs make their move. This show was done. It was over. I was going to be able to post and go to bed. But instead, I'm back here talking more to you. All right. The Leafs have acquired their backup goalie and a little grit and sandpaper. They have traded Trevor Moore, Columbus's third-round pick that they acquired earlier on in a different deal, and a conditional third-round pick, let's not get bogged down on that, to Los Angeles for goalie Jack Campbell and winger Kyle Clifford. This is so fucking familiar. Some of you guys will remember, last year, Canada Day was the last day on the job here just before I was leaving for vacation, and sat with Rob. We waited as long as we could for free agency to go down before recording the show, so we could talk about as much as we could, before putting the show together. And we shut off the mics, and Rob headed home, and I turned on the television, and the Leafs had traded Nazem Kadri. And back in here, I had to come before being able to get out and get on vacation. Anyway, I like it. I like this deal. Let's talk briefly about, it's actually interesting. Kyle Dubas relies in a very big way on guys that he's familiar with, guys that he knows. Kyle Clifford, when Kyle Dubas was a player agent, his first client was Kyle Clifford. So that's interesting. And when he was the general manager of the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds, he once traded for Jack Campbell. So previous history with both of these guys. He also has history with Rob Blake, who is the general manager of the Los Angeles Kings. That, of course, is who the Leafs traded last year with to get Jake Muzzin at right around this time of year. So actually, it might be a year to the day now that I think about it. I should look in. You know what? I'm not going to look into that. I'm tired. I'll post it on Twitter. I'm just kidding. I didn't really mean that Twitter sucks. I love Twitter. We're at Tall Can Audio. Follow us there. Here's a story on Jack Campbell. 28 years old, career backup, although did start some games last year, I guess it was, when Jonathan Quick was hurt. He's also started 20 games for them this year. So he is what he is. He's a backup, but that's what the Leafs needed right now. A career 917 save percentage, which is nothing to 916 save percentage, 917 over the last 2 years. Before this one, this year struggling a little bit, down closer to 900. But with the Kings being as bad as they have been, they're a damn near the bottom of the league kind of team. I don't worry too much about that. And it's still an upgrade on the numbers that Michael Hutchinson is giving you. So I like it. It's not an earth-shattering thing. It's not a guy coming in to take Freddie's job or to push him. He's just going to be, he's just going to be a more solid option as an NHL backup goaltender. What this does make me wonder, clearly they weren't prepared to allow Hutch to have both of these games coming up this weekend, Friday and Saturday. There's a back-to-back. Anaheim at home on Friday, and they're in Montreal on Saturday. If Freddie isn't ready, it's kind of fun. They didn't want Hutch to play both of those games, and they obviously didn't want Kaskisuo, I think is what we're going with, to play either of those games as well. This might make me wonder just a little bit if Freddie isn't going to be good to go by Friday. And that's why they felt the urgency to get this done. Maybe it was just watching Hutchinson play again on Wednesday. Maybe that's just when the trade came together. I don't know. But it doesn't make me confident that Freddie's going to be ready for the weekend. And that's why maybe they felt the need to do this now, give Campbell time to get to Toronto and get ready to play one of or possibly both of those games this weekend. So interesting there for him. I don't mind it. I think it's cheaper than what they were going to have to give up to get Georgiev out of New York, who some people thought was the leading option. They didn't give up Johnson, Janssen or Kapanen or Kerfoot or any of their secondary pieces there who should be scoring a little more, and are pieces that maybe would have to be involved in a deal for a defenseman. I was never okay with the idea that they might trade one of those guys for a backup goalie. I thought that was ridiculous, and I'm glad to see that Dubas did not do that. Trevor Moore, the guy that let's finish what we're getting from LA. Kyle Clifford is a guy who played on the LA Kings' last Stanley Cup winning team in 2014, so he's got a ton of playoff experience. Sandpaper guy. I don't know if he kills penalties or not. I'll have to look into that as well. But very physical, very gritty, right? It's kind of a guy that the Leafs don't have a ton of. So I like it in that regard. It brings an element that they don't have. He unrestricted free agent at the end of this season. So if you don't want it to be, it's not a long-term commitment, right? You could just have them here to see if they can help you make the playoffs, contribute in that playoff run, and go from there. And then if it's gone well, cool. Lock them up a little longer if you want, or let them walk. So you're not tied to anything. The other important thing to note here, given the Leafs cap situation, is that Kyle Clifford is going to have half of his salary retained by the LA Kings. I think he's about a $1.6 million cap hit. So only $800,000 of that will count against Toronto's cap this season, as LA will be keeping the rest of it. So I like it. It's, that's the type of deal that the Leafs needed to make. They didn't give up a whole lot. Let's talk about what they did give up. That was Trevor Moore is the only player off their roster. I got to tell you, I'm pretty indifferent. First of all, Kyle Clifford will slide in and do the job that Trevor Moore did, and it won't be a problem. You won't miss Trevor Moore in that regard. By getting Kyle Clifford, you filled that spot. I was never as high on Moore as everybody else, or as many other people. I didn't dislike him, but he seemed like just a guy. But this is a victory for Kyle Dubas in this regard. When he was still the assistant GM of the Leafs and thus the general manager of the Marlies, Trevor Moore was nobody. He was barely an AHL player. Kyle Dubas brought him in and made him a part of this development team that the Leafs were building, right? And this is one of the things that doesn't count against the salary cap, so Toronto has a huge advantage in. They can hire as many development guys as they want and really work with these guys. And he turned Trevor Moore into an important piece for the Toronto Marlies and a guy who helped contribute to them winning the Calder Cup. And, continued to develop him, turned him into something to the point where he ends up becoming a guy who can play for the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's not going to be a top line player in the NHL, but he's a piece. And that was a piece that we didn't have. And you brought him in and you developed him and you turned him into something for your minor league team. You continued to develop him and turned him into something for your NHL team. And then later on, when you needed to do something else, you actually had a piece that didn't exist before. You built that piece. You made that asset for yourself and turned it into what you needed later on in this trade. So that's why development systems like what Toronto have built are so important, right? Is you can create things out of nowhere. Trevor Moore, a California kid, so he's probably, he'll be disappointed to be leaving a team that is supposed to be a playoff contender to go to LA, but it is going home for him, so that'll be kind of exciting, I'm sure. It's an interesting deal, the third round pick from Columbus. You don't want to really be giving up too many draft picks, but you also don't want to be giving up guys off your roster. So this was a minimal give, and I like the deal. I don't think it's a steal. I don't think they robbed LA blind, anything. I think it's a good deal. You traded away a pick. The other pick, the third round conditional pick, we don't have all the details on it, but it's tied to the number of wins that Jack Campbell might give you and whether or not Kyle Clifford re-signs. So 2 conditions on it, right? And if both of those things were to happen, we don't know what that number of wins is for Jack Campbell, but then you would give up the third round pick to Los Angeles. So that's a maybe at this point. Even if you do give it up, I like this. I think this is what had to happen. And there's no guarantees that it's going to work, but this was the type of deal you had to be looking for. The guy had to be cheap. The Kyle Clifford throw-in, I like that. It's an element that the Leafs needed. I think he'll fit in well in that regard because it's a piece that Toronto was missing. So I thought that was good, and getting LA to keep half of it. Obviously, part of that is relationship, right? You saw this a year ago when they picked up Jake Muzzin. So these two teams are comfortable dealing with each other, and maybe we'll get into this a little more later when there's a little more info. I've had a little more time to read up on these guys. Don't look for Kyle Clifford to be much of a scorer. He's got 6 goals this year. That's not his thing. He's pretty responsible. All his underlying numbers say that he's a positive possession and Corsi type player. Like, that's going to work out pretty well. But it's the hits, right? It's the defensive awareness. It's that grittiness. It's that playoff experience that you're going to like out of him. And then whether Freddie's back and ready to go on Friday or whether he's a little while away, Jack Campbell is a capable backup. He can start a couple games here for you if you need to as an upgrade over Hutchinson. And if Freddie's back, that's fine too. Now you have a better backup who can play a few more games for you and probably make you a little more comfortable. So I like it. We're going to wrap this up again here now. If I turn this off and there's another trade, I don't care. I'm going to bed and we'll get to it at a later time. But, Kyle didn't wait. He decided he'd seen enough, I guess. And I can't say I blame him, right? This was something that they had to go do. And, all that's left to do now is sit back and wait and see. But I really like the deal for Toronto. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not a huge Trevor Moore guy. So I'm fine with that being the only roster piece you give up. Like I said, the last thing I'll leave you with here is all those other pieces you've been hearing about with Kapanen and Kerfoot and Janssen and pieces like that you might have to trade. You still have them. So if he's still out there looking for an upgrade on defense, you still have those pieces that maybe you can use there that you didn't have to use to go get this goaltender. So I like the move, and we'll see how it goes.